This is the Financial Freedom Fighters podcast.
Step number 5, analyzing deals and making offers, right? You are actually in the trenches at this point, looking at deals and firing off offers. And I do want to acknowledge probably the anxiety that comes with submitting your first offers. I know that that's something that I felt for the first several offers. You're just like, what if it gets accepted? What if it gets accepted? And that's fine. That's fine. That anxiety is going to be there. But you can reduce that anxiety a little bit if you know how to run the numbers. If you know how to run the numbers, you are quantifying and trying to eliminate some of the anxiety with not knowing how the property is going to perform and how it's likely to do for you from an investment perspective if you know how to run the numbers. So we could probably do a whole episode, and we might do a whole episode on deal analysis and deal deep dives and things like that. But at a very, very high level, we'll kind of touch on what are the big buckets we need to pay attention to, and what is some of the high level math that we can try to do to understand if this property is going to perform or even be a worthwhile investment. Because let's be real, Mike, most of the properties that are listed on MLS or on Redfin, Zillow, whatever, they're not going to make great investments, right? They would probably be poor investments if we're thinking about a traditional cash flow perspective. A lot of deals, even in Cleveland, wouldn't cash flow, right? And let alone other markets that are not known for cash flow. So it's imperative that you as the investor know how to run the numbers so you're not buying bad deals. And I would say your investor-friendly agent will also know how to run the numbers, but do not rely on them, because you should also have that skill set. You should also know what you're doing, know how to run your numbers. And there's no excuse. There's a lot of tools out there. I have a calculator that I use. Bigger Pockets is a calculator. There's calculators everywhere. And these things are built to just input a few numbers, and it's going to tell you what the cash on cash return is, right? So there's no excuse. If you can input some numbers, if you can do some basic addition and subtraction and division, then you know how to analyze a real estate deal. But I'll take 2 steps back. Let's just think about this. What is the basic formula for trying to understand the profitability of a rental property? It is very simply your income minus your expenses equals your cash flow. At a high level, income minus expenses equals your cash flow. That is the formula for basically any business. And when you buy an investment property, that is what you are doing. You are purchasing a mini business. Each rental property operates as a business, generates revenue in the form of rent. It has operating expenses. And that hopefully at the end of the day, you have extra money. That is your profit. That is your cash flow, right? So don't overcomplicate it. This is very simple. It's income minus expenses equals cash flow. So let's break that down. Income, Mike. Very simply, if we're talking about a rental property, your income is coming from the rent that you're able to get. So where you look that up, you can look at it in a variety of different ways. You can manually look it up on Zillow to see what the properties are renting for in that particular neighborhood. You can look at rentometer.com and you could just like find that. That's what I do, and just be realistic here, right? Be realistic. Don't assume you're going to get the highest rents in that neighborhood. There's probably a reason why that property is renting for a lot more. Maybe it has more amenities, etc. But that's it. If there's other income, it's not super typical for smaller properties, but if there's other income, maybe there's a storage unit, maybe there's laundry income. There could be other things, but for the most part, smaller single family, smaller multifamily, it's just going to be the rent, right? And so that's your income. Your expenses are going to be, what are your property taxes? What are your insurance? What are the utilities that you're responsible for? Gas and electric typically is the responsibility of the tenant, right? Most of the time. Water and sewer kind of depends on the metering situation, but usually landlords, especially in Cleveland, are responsible for water and sewer. And then you have things like landscaping, garbage maybe is something you'll take into consideration. So those are your big operating expenses. And then one of the big areas that are overlooked from a beginning investor when analyzing a potential cash flow of a property is the reserves. Stuff is going to break at the property. Stuff is going to need to be replaced. Your fridge, your laundry machines, the roof eventually, right? All of these things are going to need to be replaced. And if you are not budgeting for that in your deal analysis with maintenance reserves, CapEx reserves, and your property is going to be vacant. I dealt with a double vacancy this year. It hurt. You have to budget for these eventualities, and you have to factor that into the deal analysis. So does your reserves. And lastly, the biggest expense category, which is not technically an operating expense, is your debt service, right? Your actual mortgage and your interest. And so that is going to be easy to calculate. Your lender is going to let you know exactly what that is. The big driver of that's interest rate and the down payment, etc. And that's it. You take your income, subtract all your operating expenses, subtract your debt service, and what you have is your cash flow. And hopefully that number's positive. And then you take that and you say, okay, cool. Let's say the property's generating $200 a month. How much money did you invest in that property to actually generate that $200 a month? That's going to give you your cash on cash return, right? So if you had a property, let's say for an entire year, is generating $1,000 in cash flow. If you invested $10,000 for that, right? That would be a 10% cash on cash return, right? If you put $10,000. Now, if you put way more money than that into it, your cash on cash return goes down, right? So that's why the cash on cash return is important, because the net cash flow number is one thing, but how much money you took to put into that to generate that cash on cash return helps you understand the efficiency of that particular property. Just because something's generating $500 in cash flow doesn't make it better than a property that's generating $250, especially if it took much more money to generate that $500. So that's the cash on cash return.
So we're past that initial phase of getting the property that we like you, the example you used, you sent me an email with 8 properties. Of the 8, I only liked 1. So maybe that's one that we then dive into the deal analysis on, like you just laid out. And then if we liked that result at that point, okay, let's put an offer in, right? Well, what's the offer got to look like? Well, it depends. For a long time, everything had multiple offers and it was selling 10, 15, 20% over, and pretty wild. Is that happening today? Yeah, it still is. It still is. Is it happening as much? Not as much, but it's still ultra competitive out there. So what you have to do then is obviously look at a range, right? Like, what could this sell for? And you have to then determine whether or not that, making those numbers in your spreadsheet, does that work? And then from there, making offers is tough. And you're going to have to write more offers than you probably want to. But at the end of the day, what I also tell people is, remember, this is not your forever home. This is a vehicle to help you build that financial know-how, right? To get you from point A to point B. So from that perspective, you want to then, make efficient offers. You want to offer what you can, right? And I always tell people too, and I've probably told you this, Jacob, as well, when you make the offer, because I'll have people ask me, well, what should I offer? At the end of the day, like, you have to determine what that is. I will tell you what I see, right? Like, I'll run an analysis, I'll run a comp report, I'll share the comp report with you, and I'll look at it from that perspective and go, well, hey, I think it's priced right. Or no, like it's priced low. Like, they did this on purpose, right? Or even it's priced high. Like, I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, hey, if a deal's high, and if they get, if they get a cash buyer to come in and buy it, okay, great. Good for them. Good for them. So those are the things. What are the different elements besides price, obviously, right,
Mike? And there's a philosophy, and your agent is going to counsel you on where are you coming in terms of the offer and price, like how much over should we be, or should we stick at the list, or like and things like that. So there's obviously the price component, which is clear, right, of the offer. But what are the different other components of the offer that are important and that could potentially differentiate buyer's offer from all the other offers that property might be receiving?
It's not that complicated anymore. What are the other terms that you can change? Earnest money, right? You can make a bigger earnest money deposit. Earnest money used to really, really have a lot of teeth and mean something. It doesn't mean as much as it used to, but because of how difficult it is for you to have to actually lose your earnest money. But
can we explain earnest money deposit for the listener?
Yeah, absolutely. Earnest money deposit, or what would used to be called your good faith deposit, right? Is money that you're putting into the escrow that's going to be used towards your cash to close, that you are willing to risk in the event that you breach the contract, right? And it depends on the state, depends on the location, on how much that is. In our market, 1% to 2% of the contract price is pretty standard. But people always especially the new investor, they get hung up on the earnest money. Just understand that, hey, you're gonna give that money to the escrow company. The escrow company is going to hold it in their trust account. That money doesn't leave that trust account until you go to closing table. Period. And the next contingency in the contract would obviously be the inspection contingency. I never counsel anybody to waive an inspection. If we lose a deal because someone else waived inspections, then you just tip your hat and you wish them luck, and we move on to the next deal. And the reason being is, while I'm your eyes and ears here and I'm very knowledgeable, I'm also not a home inspector. So I'm not, I can't pretend to be one. So that's why I tell people, like, inspections are very important and don't waive them.
We have step 1, determine the goals and budget. Step 2, pick the target market. Step 3, got linked up with an investor-friendly agent. Step 4, gotten pre-approved. Step 5, figured out how to analyze deals, started firing off offers. And step 6, where we are right now, you are under contract. Congrats.
Now
you are now the real fun begins. And it's a mindset shift, right? You started going from looking at tons of different properties, analyzing a bunch of deals, firing off different offers, trying to understand the different neighborhood. And it all kind of comes to this slow motion stop. You get that call from your agent. Hey, we're under contract.
Yes, sir.
And now there's a new level of anxiety that kind of overcomes the first time buyer, which is like, oh man, now we're actually really doing this thing. You have any other things to say about getting under contract?
You know, when you get under contract, obviously it's uplifting, right? Like, you're happy, right? But understanding that that's when the real work begins, right? That's when everyone's digging in, right? I'm working back channels to get us access, to get video tours, to get pictures, to get the inspecting team in there, through all that subtle stuff. And then that rolls into the due diligence, right? Which is kind of that next step that we're going to talk about. So step seven. So getting under contract is a step because it's a mindset shift, but it really kicks off the due diligence period, which is the next hurdle to kind of clear to get this transaction closed. And so, Mike, I'll pass it over to you. But at a high level, from my perspective as the investor, due diligence is the period you have to really understand if this is a property that fits your goals, that fits your criteria, a property that you really do want to go with the transaction with. Because once the inspection period closes, you cannot back out. And if you do back out, you lose your earnest money deposit like we had talked about earlier. Take this as an opportunity. Relook at your financials, right? Do more research on that specific zip code. Do more research. Make sure you like the neighborhood. Get more information. And then obviously, as these inspections are coming through, take the time to really understand what you're looking at here, because this is your time to kick the tires, to look under the hood, to just say, okay, I feel good about this. This feels like it's an investment property that I want to go through with. And Mike, what are your kind of tidbits on due diligence? So due diligence, right? That's the whole process that you're going to go through as the investor to understand that this property is the one that I want, right? So first things first, we start with the inspection process. So, I've got obviously a great inspection team in place. I'll work those channels. We'll get the inspection set up. Typically what we recommend is obviously the general home inspection. And then depending on the age of the property, we've talked about the sewer scopes, right? Those are the two biggies, right, in our market. From there, during the due diligence period, you have to get your earnest money deposit to the escrow company. In my contract that my brokerage uses, it says you have 4 days to do that. My admin will send out an email introduction to you as the client saying, hey, these are, and he lines it out for you in the email. This is your contracted date. This is your contracted close date. This is the earnest money due date. This is the title company's information. This is who you need to talk to. This is how many days you have for inspection. Like, he lays it out for you to give you that information succinctly in one snapshot, right? And then other contingencies that you do have built into the contract, there's title, right? You have to be able, especially if you're using a loan, if you're leveraging the property, you have to be able to be given clear and marketable title, which means that you're purchasing the property free of any liens, encumbrances, things like that. And then also too, there is that appraisal. Your pre-approval typically says right on the pre-approval, it is contingent on a satisfactory appraisal, and a satisfactory appraisal is an appraisal that meets or exceeds the contracted sale price. So, but yeah, so that's the due diligence in a nutshell. You're going to have 7 to 10, 12 days or so for us to do that. Once we get the inspection back, you're going to get a nice report, usually within about 24 hours. At that point, we review the report, and then we determine next steps.
Yeah.
And next steps can be a myriad of things. It can be you accept the property in as-is condition, you walk away, you could ask for some type of repair or concession.
This is really important, I feel, for the beginning investor. You're getting an inspection report that's 50 pages long that outlines everything that's potentially wrong with the property, right? There's a little leak here. This outlet seems like it doesn't work or whatever. All these things are going to pile up and everything is going to seem really, really serious. And that, I think, is a function of the inspection industry in general. They have a lot of liability. They want to make sure that they are calling out everything because they don't want somebody to come back and be like, hey, you missed all these things. So they're going to call everything out, everything that they possibly see. And just know, and Mike said this to me in the first deal, don't look at the inspection report as a doomsday report. You should really focus on the big ticket items. What are the things that, if something's wrong with it, is going to cost you a lot of money? The actual things that are going to cause you to tank this deal. What are the big things, right? The mechanicals, the HVAC, the water heater, the big items like the roof. Does the roof need to replace pretty soon? That really changes the kind of unit economics of a deal. Is there anything wrong with the foundation? That's typically not very easy to fix, right? So focus on the big ticket items, and the sewer, scope the sewer, right? Make sure the sewer is in good working order, especially for an older property. If those big ticket items are in a good spot, you're probably okay.
No, it's a great point. What I tell people is the biggest things that you have to worry about in these properties is foundation, roof, electrical system, plumbing system, windows, because those are your biggest of the big ticket items that you'll have to deal with. So, beyond that, including HVAC as well. Beyond that, if everything's in good working order, and you have at least half the life left of the roof and the mechanicals, because if the electrical has been updated, it's been updated. It doesn't need to be touched again. If the plumbing has been updated, from, galvanized steel lines to copper or PEX, no need to mess with that. Right. But those other items can get pricey. So as long as I always tell people, as long as they have at least half their life left, which is typically, roof here, 25, 30 years. If it's done correctly and they're using a good shingle, you're going to get 25, 30 years. Furnaces, if you take care of them, you're going to get 25, 30 years.
That is due diligence. And again, folks, don't be overwhelmed. Just rely on your agent to kind of walk you through the process and just try to go through it with a level head. But I totally understand how anxious that can feel. There's no way to get around that. Your first deal especially, it's going to be a pretty nerve-wracking step in the process. So moving on to step number 8. This is while you're conducting due diligence, while you're under contract for a particular property, you should at this time probably be speaking to property managers. And for those who are new to real estate investing, a property manager is the person that is going to, once you close on the transaction, is going to take over that property on your behalf. And they are going to be managing the day-to-day operations of that property. They're going to get it filled with tenants. They're going to manage those tenants and the communication with those tenants. They're going to collect rents. They're going to manage maintenance and repairs of the property. They're going to do all of the boots on the ground, day-to-day operations of the property. And that, for somebody that wants to build a passive income stream, and again, real estate is not passive entirely, but it's more passive than working an actual active job for sure. And it can be more passive if you have a great property manager. So I'm a big advocate for a property manager. How much is that going to cost? Probably 8 to 10% of the gross monthly rents, just depending on who the property manager is and what the company is. Well worth the cost. You don't want to be one of the big arguments against investing in real estate, right? I don't want to deal with tenants and toilets, and nobody does, right? I don't. I definitely don't. So that's why you hire a property manager. So at this time, this is a critical moment. And again, all goes back to your cheat code of an investor-friendly agent. Any agent that is a good, solid one will have spent the time to build connections with different property managers in the market, right? And so they can offer you up multiple property managers. And same thing with the agent. You want to interview a property manager who, one, you can build a good rapport with, right? Because property management's a tough job, and you have to have some tough conversations sometimes with their property manager. So you want to pick one that you like, right? One they can have a good rapport with. And yeah, so I think this is an important step, and they're also going to have a different perspective. They're going to know what the rental market is specifically, right? In different zip codes, they're going to know exactly what rent you can get, so you can gut check your rental estimates and your underwriting. They're going to know how much the water bill is going to come out to. They're going to know how much it's going to cost to do certain repairs and things like that, right? And so interview some property managers, get some good property manager contacts from your agent, and yeah, interview property managers and try to get one lined up before closing. Because at that point, when you close, if your agent and your property manager know each other, it can be, in my experience, as simple as the property manager gets the keys from you, Mike, the agent, and you're off to the races. So anything to add there on the property management side, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people, property management is the hardest part of the equation when it comes to rental property investing. And it's the most thankless part of it too. I mean, honestly, because of the things that you outlined, the tenants and the toilets and the this and the that. So yes, it's a critical part of the function, but a necessary one, really is. But yeah, the property manager obviously is going to be a critical part of the equation as well. Just like the agent, just like the lender. Those are probably your three. You want to look at it like a tripod, right? The three pillars of your tripod are going to be your agent, your property manager, and then your lender. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so we'll cut to the last step here, which is you've gone through due diligence, you've accepted it, you've interviewed property manager, you've selected a property manager. And I'm actually going to say the last step here, Mike, is you close. So what happens when you actually close? What does that actually look like for the buyer? I'm a buyer that doesn't live in Cleveland, and I'm closing on a property in Cleveland. And so the closing can actually be a pretty uneventful day itself, right? The title company will send out a what's the
notary.
The title company will send out a notary to visit you in your actual location. This triplex, they came to my home, and you'll sign a ton of documents. Get ready to be signing documents for probably an hour and a half. You don't have to actually bring any checks or anything like that. All of that stuff is being wired to the title company. So that, again, you're going to wire your down payment, your closing costs. You'll get the final amount that you need to wire from your lender and from the title company. So you'll wire that amount, you'll sign some documents, and that's pretty much it, right? You'll get a nice call from your agent saying congrats, and when are we doing the next one? But anything else to add there, Mike, from a closing perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I'll be honest, it's a little anticlimactic. It is really, once you get to the end, because you're like, you're kind of worn out, but it is a good feeling, right? So yeah, just to touch on, because I get that question a lot, like, do I have to physically be there to close? No, it's 2023. We can sign you pretty much anywhere. So, the title companies will find a mobile notary to wherever you live, and they'll send them to your place of business. They'll send them to your house usually, and you'll sign your docs. Then they will actually they will overnight them back to Ohio to the title companies, because the file has to be filed with the county where you're buying the property. All the money has to be received from your bank, from the down payment, and from the lender. And at which point they've received all that, they can do what's called funding and filing the deal. So they fund it, right? So that the seller gets his money. And then they file the deal with the county. That means you own it. At that point, the title company usually, if we use my title company, for example, they send out a text message. We'll get an email. And at that point, we all know, hey, great. You'll get a text message from me. Congrats. And then from there, that's where I step in and handle off the handoff process to the property manager. And they'll take over, whether it's getting them a set of keys, getting them copies of leases. It's all going to depend on the particular property. If your property is vacant, obviously, we'll just get the property manager the keys. From there, he will then take over with you in concert together to get the property rented. If there's repairs that need to be done, he'll execute that for you. If it's already rented, then it's a lot less transitional. It's literally just getting, if there is a set of keys, getting an extra set of keys to the property manager, getting him a copy of the leases, getting the property manager all the contact information for the tenants. And we collect all that information during due diligence anyway. So we'll have it in your file ready to go to turn over to the property manager. And from that point, yeah, you're now transitioned from newbie to investor, right?
To investor. And
you've graduated.
And you've graduated. And this is important, right, Mike? Because I think one thing that I've heard in different podcasts, which I really, really like, is there are a lot of people who do 0 real estate deals. And there are a lot of people who do a ton of real estate deals, but there is no one that only does one, right? So after you do the first one, you will do the second one. It might not be immediately, but you will do the second one. I'm testament to this as well. I did my first deal and did my second deal probably 6 months after that. And so the first one is the hardest to do. Honestly, it's the hardest to do. The most anxiety to overcome, the most fearful. And after that, you've learned a ton. You've gone through it once, and the second time is not nearly as scary, right? The third time is not nearly as scary after that. And so congrats on obviously getting to the very end of your first deal. There's so much still to learn, but you've taken a massive, massive step in acquiring the first one, and it's going to be the first of many. Yeah,
it's very typical. It's very typical. I have very few people that I've worked with that have only bought one. So,
yep.
It's usually a stepping stone to more bigger and better things. So, but,
yep.
And usually it goes good. It doesn't have to, but it usually does. There's always going to be hurdles to get through. I mean, even with your deals, we've had hurdles, and my own deals, I've had hurdles. But at the end of the day, we're trucking along to that goal, and we're going to keep plugging away because, as we said last time, and we'll say this time, and we'll say every time in the future, if it were easy, everyone would do it, right? So it's not easy, but it's not rocket science. So
absolutely. I know that was a lot. We went through a lot of info on this episode, but I hope we provided some value for you if you are just thinking about jumping into real estate investing, or maybe you've done one deal already. And so, Mike, as we wrap up episode 2, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so most of my socials are Realtor Michael Magno. That's the Instagram handle. YouTube. You can find me on Facebook, at the Magno Group, right? That's pretty much anything you'll find me. Or honestly, via email too would be easy. Michael at themagnogroup.com, all one word. Pretty simple. Shoot me a message, and we can hook up from there. What about you?
Awesome. Me, I am at Cashflow Saga on all socials. So that's Cashflow Saga. I also have my website, cashflowsaga.com. I blog about real estate investing, obviously. And so go check me out there. Shoot me a follow on social, and shoot Mike a follow. And I think that's episode 2. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you in episode 3. Peace.
See ya.